Angie,
John.
we had a message from a listener and she says she loves the show and thinks you're absolutely the best.
You mean both of us?
No, it clearly says Angie is the best thing about the show.
Oh, I'm sorry. She didn't mention you too? Are you upset?
No, I agree with her. You're great. That's why I wanted to do the show with you.
So you're not upset?
No, are you kidding? I'm not taking it personally. I'm sure I'll have my share of fans too.
You are?
Okay, now I'm starting to take it personally. Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Not taking things personally would be a great topic for us, don't you think?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's start the show. Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Yeah, one of the places we run into as coaches is when we receive, as John called it, feedback. I called it complaints.
Sometimes it is complaints, but I think it's better to address stuff as feedback because ultimately it is all feedback. And there's different types of feedback. There's constructive feedback. There's destructive feedback. There's useless feedback. There are all sorts of feedback. So let's cover it all with feedback.
Yeah.
But feedback is challenging sometimes. Or maybe it should be, because not all the feedback you're going to get is, oh, you're wonderful, you're great, you're amazing. It's nice when we get that, but that's not the feedback that actually helps us to grow.
Yeah, honestly. And when I do any kind of coaching, when I see clients that are striving toward that perfectionistic mind, that's what they do. I always say to them, stop looking for that because A, it doesn't exist. But even beyond that, you're not going to grow if everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And as coaches, we need to be in a growth mindset, right?
Oh,
we
yes.
need to be able to grow and shift and change and learn, for sure.
Yeah. When I very first started doing coaching, and you can let me know if you had a similar experience, there was certainly a period of time where I was only as good as my last session, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
My ability as a coach really depended on how did my last session go? Because if it went great, I was like, oh, I'm great. I've definitely picked the right path for me. I'm super good at this, and this is so me. And then if the session didn't go well, or sometimes some really horrible ones, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I probably had picked the wrong profession. Maybe I should go and get a job. It was like that for ages, for absolutely ages. Did you have that?
I don't know if I exactly had it like that. I think maybe once or twice I had questioned myself and said, do you really want to do this? And it was the result of a couple of really challenging clients. But one of my mentors taught me this. And I didn't, and I remember her saying, you have no idea how important this is going to be, but listen to what I'm saying. This is not about you. And the minute you stop making it about you, then you're not that you're not worried, because of course, as coaches, we want to deliver the best that we can for those clients in that moment. We are not valued at only the great sessions, right? Or the result of the outcomes. That's just not a great mindset to be in when you're a coach.
No, I think it took me I was going to say maybe 2 years, but I think certainly by 12 months in, I started to have more confidence in my ability. Like when the vast majority of my coaching sessions went well, when clients are coming back and getting results and also renewing as well. Clients renewing was a pretty good indication that things were going well. I felt a lot more confident as things went on. Sometimes confidence does just come from having the experience and doing more of it. I didn't need to rely on that sort of thing. How was the last session? How do I feel about that? Because even years on, I've still had some coaching sessions go really off the rails. and maybe even questioned myself after that. But not question myself as to whether I should be a coach, but really question, I go into deep analysis of what could I have done differently? Was there a better way to handle that situation? So it's different now.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think that we always need to be doing that check-in anyway. And I'm not saying that because we need to beat ourselves up and grind. I have to be better. I have to be better. But I think it's always a great idea to look at the individual sessions with clients and say, okay, that went really well. But again, not because of you and how you feel about it, but to say, okay, are they progressing, or are they stuck in the same places? Am I actually helping them to move forward? It's really, what are you gauging a good session on versus I don't want to say bad, but I don't know. Have you ever had a bad session? I've had one or two bad sessions where, one client in particular is popping into mind where she was literally mother effing me like 6 ways to Sunday. She came into the session with negative energy. It was the end of her very long work week. It was raining on her. I could hear the energy. And there was a part of me, I'm going to be honest, that was going to reschedule. But I said, hey, so how are you feeling about your energy coming into the session? Do you feel like you're going to be able to put all those other things aside and be objective? And she was like, of course I can. I'm a professional. And it went really south. And I had a moment when she was telling me off where I was like, I felt something. I had an emotion. And I was like, no. And I stopped her. I didn't even let her finish the rant on how much I'm spending and how dare you. And I wouldn't be feeling this way if you were doing your job. And literally. And in that moment, I had to separate and say, first of all, we don't curse at Coach Angie. We don't do that. I don't curse at you. You're not cursing at me. You want to curse? I have clients that are like, you say some things, but they're not directing it at me. I had to regain control of that session and said to her, so that's the first thing I'm telling you out of the gate, that although you might be paying me, I will happily refund you if you think that's how the conversation should go. And that was my emotional response, right? I was like, no, not going to happen. And then she sat for a minute in silence. And it was honestly, I just remembered the feeling, sat there and I was like, it was so uncomfortable to let that silence remain. And then it was because it was probably good 2 minutes. Do you know how long 2 minutes is in a session with nothing? It was pretty hard.
Dead.
Yeah. And she came back to earth and she apologized. And I said, okay, what's happening? What's really going on here? What are you really angry about? I had to reframe everything. But the hardest part of that was understanding first and accepting it wasn't about me. That I didn't do her wrong. It wasn't my coaching. It wasn't how much she was paying me. She was having a bad day, week, month, year, life at that point. And for some reason, it was coming to some head. And guess who was right in the line of fire? Yours truly. But if I had experienced, I'm going to say this to you. If I had experienced early in my career, I probably would have burst into tears.
I was going to say, it sounds like quite a good example of not taking that personally, being able to pull back and say, whoa, we're not doing this.
Yeah. But that's hard. I think that is a skill.
I agree. I can certainly think of, gosh, I'm trying to think of the last time I had something like that happen. And it was like probably last year, I think, doing a session with a guy who's like complete know-it-all. It was our second session working together. But all the stuff that he had that was issues was he was making it all about me. You're the crappy coach. You're with the crappy company and blah, 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 blah. And I really was at a stage where I was like, I'm not taking this personally. It's okay, if that's how you feel, maybe you should work with another coach. Whatever these issues are, they're actually not on me. I'm not here to argue my case. It's like your feelings are your feelings. But if you have an issue, maybe take it up with the customer service team.
Sure.
Not that I really liked laying stuff off onto other people, but the guy wasn't going to communicate with me, and we ended up not working together anymore, which was a great relief. But yeah, definitely in a position there where it's okay, I have no reason to take this personally. And even a situation that I told you about with another client of mine, a longer term client who did after the fact send me a litany of complaints.
Oh, yes.
About our time working together.
Uh-huh.
Now, that was a bit harder not to take personally. But even though I knew that all the stuff I was being blamed for wasn't on me, the fact that I was being blamed for it by somebody who I'd worked with was a little personal. This is that thing of, I don't feel like that stuff was my fault. But I still, as we've talked about many times, I still took that look as saying, what can I learn from this? Are there ways I could improve? Could there have been situations where I might have intervened a little more, or just said, you know what, have you thought about it from this perspective? There may have been. I don't know for sure, but there may have been. But it maybe at least makes me a little more aware of making sure that I frame up with someone that just because you've got a coach, it does not guarantee that everything you do is going to work out in your favor. It just doesn't.
It's like medicine. You know how they call it like the medical practice? And sometimes people are a little sarcastic and go, yeah, it's a practice because it's a science and everything isn't always so black and white. And I really feel like having a coaching practice is similar. And I like the point that you brought out, you touched on, and I think this is really important, is that you can't, as a coach, you can't always just assume that fault, if that's even the right word, is going to be on the client. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. You need to, as a coach, be objective and have enough emotional intelligence and professionalism to take the step and say, geez, am I understanding them enough? Because is it that they really feel this way? Are there extenuating circumstances? That's your job. You have to create an understanding for yourself so that you know how to proceed. You can't always assume, because I'm going to say this, you and I are great coaches. I've seen you coach, heard you coach. I know how you coach. And I think that you're a great coach. Do I think that you're perfect? No. And I'm not either. But we have to understand too that as we're talking to this big audience, that there are people who go into coaching and not that they're intentionally doing things wrong, but not everybody's a great coach either. And maybe there are going to be those people who look at a situation and say, they're off their rocker. I did my best. I did this and this. I checked all the boxes and this is on them. You know what I mean? Where they're creating a sense of blame rather than looking at it and saying, wait a minute, let me look at this objectively. What happened? One of the practices that I got into, and this was the urging of a mentor, and it's a great practice. I don't do it on the daily, but at the end of the week, I always look back on my sessions and say, okay, what did I perceive as my greatest session and why? And how can I expand upon whatever happened there? Was it a skill set that I'll cultivate even more? But what was my most challenging session and why? Was it my energy? You know what? If I have something in my life, I actually had a situation, I don't know, because this was months ago, we were still working together. I fell down the stairs in the morning.
Right.
And I had sessions and I was like, didn't break anything, but I really felt like I got hit by a truck. So I really had to consider whether I was going to be able to show up, because I don't believe as a coach, I don't believe in pushing through when there's something like that, whether it's a death or something. So you really have to create that opportunity for yourself to say, okay, not what did I do wrong or badly or poorly, because this is all about positive and creating better habits and whatnot. But you have to make decisions sometimes and separate yourself from the actual interaction and say, how did I show up? First and foremost, forget how that person was mother effing me. How did I even show up? Did I say something in a way or do something in some way that actually triggered that? Again, however you want to check your own boxes, but I always start with me and I say to myself, what was my most challenging session of the week and why? And how did I show up to that session? That's the first question I ask myself in the sessions that I deem or perceive as challenging, is me.
Yeah.
Not for self-blame, not for self-victimization or assassination, right? Like, I'm the coach. I am the pace car. I am in control.
With you. Yeah.
So important.
That client with the list of grievances, I know that wasn't really about me. I was just a figure to blame for stuff that was going on. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't stuff for me to learn from that situation, and that there weren't things that I probably could have done better in working with that client. No, I think I said to you before, there were things I could have called out a bit more where I knew that there was a bit of BS going on, and there things maybe weren't quite as wonderful as he was telling me they were. But I could have called that out more. I know that. So that was great. I learned something from that. But was it personal? The things I was being blamed for were not things that I did or that I caused. No, it was lashing out. But was there something useful to come from that? Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite books over the years, and there are certainly good books in the world of personal development, and there's not so good or awful ones as well, plenty of those. One that I really like, though, is called The Four Agreements. Have you ever come across it? Don Miguel Ruiz. There is a Fifth Agreement as well. Don't bother with that book. It's, in my opinion, the Fifth Agreement is great, but the book is super long and unnecessary. But The Four Agreements, really wonderful book. And one of the Four Agreements is don't take things personally. Great. Yeah. These are all really great principles. What it was like, always do your best, be impeccable with your word. There's really good stuff to live your life by. And so don't take things personally, because it generally isn't about you. The feedback that you get is from someone else in the position and the state that they are in when they give that feedback. It's not ultimately about you, even if the feedback is directly, seemingly about you. It's just very much about them and what they want to project onto you. And so it really comes down to this whole thing of projection, to that degree of like nobody can, and we know this logically, nobody can make you feel a certain way. Nobody can make you feel a certain way. We have to let them in and allow them to do that. We choose the feelings that we have. It's tough because when there are people that you're very connected to and that you care about in your life, it definitely seems like they can make you feel a certain kind of way sometimes.
Usually because they're striking a nerve. There's something there that you have, right? If somebody actually, and I'm going to air quote this, makes you feel a certain way, there's some like self-reflection needed, because you are already probably feeling something there, and they just hit it, you bruise your arm, and then all of a sudden you keep hitting the same spot, and they're already.
I approach saying this tentatively, and I'll tell you why, because I have enough times in the personal development world seen people weaponize that and say, I'm not making you feel anything. If someone says that, I'm not making you feel anything. I say, oh no, please, F you, please control my language as best I can in this episode. But seriously, that is weaponizing that, because then that's turning it up even more. You are intentionally pressing somebody's buttons, and we do have responses, conditioned responses, emotional responses. We are emotional beings that are likely to get triggered and fired up. So you might not be making them feel this, but you are causing a reaction.
I think that some coaches play it safe too around those spaces, right? And I don't know what happened with you and this person that you say, oh, I probably could have gone in a little bit more, challenged a little bit more. But I think sometimes we have to read the room, right? We have to, maybe sometimes in that moment, there's something that makes us say, you know what, today is not the day for that. And I'm not a believer in stepping around or tiptoeing or circling the drain, as you all know by now. I pretty much go right for it, but I do it in a way that's not abrasive. I go for it, but I also will read the room. And I sometimes say, you know what, today's not the day for that. Why? Because even if I try to work on a specific, whatever it is, challenge for them that I know they're having, if their energy is off on that day, they're not going to receive the work anyway. So I'm going to focus probably more on their energy and teaching them how to like still be productive when they're in that space than what I thought the problem of it or the challenge of the session was. So it really depends on that. But I also feel like too, on another side of things, is that there are things that we can absolutely black and white control, right? If somebody comes to you and says, Angie, you're always an hour late. I'm sorry. a minute late and I have a 60-minute call, and then you end the call 3 minutes early. Like, to me, that is very black and white, and you're not doing right. You don't have good habits. You're not prepared as a coach. You need to be able to do those things. But there's the subjective piece, your perception and the perception of the person that's in the session with you. And I think that's why we as the coaches have to have that very objective. You need to be able to do those two. I talk about this a lot, I feel, but you need to be able to be conscious in the set, present in that session, but you also need to be able to keep your eye on the over, or like that bird's eye view of what's actually happening. You can't just get lost in the moment. You have to be able to gauge things from a higher perspective. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. And even then, I'm going to say something that is very dangerous, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure that my husband doesn't listen to this. So I'm taking a risk. I'm taking a risk in saying this on the show, but because it is feedback I've offered before. But my husband particularly doesn't take feedback well and takes it often as an attack. And I certainly find that the situation you were talking about, maybe someone comes back to you and says, hey, you know what, you consistently show up a minute late for your sessions and you finish them early. I feel like maybe I'm not getting my money's worth. You don't need to take that as an attack. You don't need to say that personally. Okay, I can weigh that up and say, hey, you're right, that's fair. I remember having feedback one time that I was going and speaking with a friend who was working in a shop, and the store owner came up to me and said, you know what, I'm actually paying them to work here and you're spending all this time chatting with them. I wasn't very happy about that situation, but when I went out, I was like, he's absolutely right. And my friend was responsible there as well, as knowing that they should be working. But yeah, it's right. It was their time. I shouldn't have been socializing in that shop at that time. Some people might be okay with that. This guy wasn't. Absolutely fine. There was really no problem with that. At first, maybe initially I felt a bit attacked and aggrieved by it. But when I went out, no, he's right. I shouldn't be doing that. Have that to put the boundary in place. And actually, it wasn't mean about how he approached it or anything like that. So it was all very thick. Sometimes we do take feedback as being a personal attack. And that's really what we're talking about with not taking it personally. Just feedback does not mean that it's an attack. Making a statement does not always mean that you're making a complaint. Sometimes I'm definitely an observational kind of guy. I notice everything that's going on in my environment. So I will mention things. And again, very often I'm out with my husband and he'll say, stop complaining. Like, I'm not complaining. I'm actually just observing and making statements about what I'm observing. And this isn't complaining. It's really important to know the difference, because it's not me taking any I don't take this personally. We all need to have that detachment. There definitely was a time in my life where I took everything personally. I would get super emotional about or things like that. But that time isn't now. Not so much.
One of the practices that I have in place, and I do this at the end of all of my one-to-one sessions, and it's not because I want to be really clear here. I'm not looking for the pat on the back and somebody to praise me and bow and all of that. But at the end of my sessions, I will say, let me ask you, what did you value the most from our session today? And the reason that I do that is because I want to understand their perception of the call. I want to understand it. What did you value the most? And I might change up the word, but I usually say value, because 9 times out of 10, I will say that the response I get is, you know what, Angie, I really needed that push today. They're usually not going to complain, and I'm doing the check-in and it's received. It's very much appreciated that I'm asking it. And I preface it. I'm not looking for you to tell me, we're going to light off rockets and whatever, because you're so amazing. That's not it. But I need to understand. I want to hear from them. And I always give them permission. Like when I'm setting up the boundaries and the expectations for our relationship, right, over the course of our coaching relationship, one of the things that I say is, I expect you to tell me if something is going on, right? If there was like a death in the family or something, if there's something that has happened, I will take 5 minutes at the beginning of a call and say, what's going on? How was the week? And I don't want the rundown of all the things they did and I'm clear, but I want to understand, because that is going to tell me sometimes if I don't do that, when I wasn't doing that, 10 minutes before the end of the session, somebody might say to me or has said to me, I'm so sorry, I was really off today. I had this really difficult conversation with my boss, or I had an argument with my spouse, or I found out my kid was on drugs, or somebody passed away. And although I like to keep the chit chat to a minimum so that we're not just shooting the breeze and have that expensive cup of coffee that we talk about, but I need to understand where they're at. I need to know. So that's going to give me an indication. I do that check-in at the end when I ask them what they valued in the session. That, or I even might say, what was the most, I know it was a really challenging session. I will even put it right out there and say, we had a lot of challenging conversation today. What was the most challenging for you? And let them say, oh, it was this. Oh, hey, so what are we going to do? What will you do between now and next session to relieve that pressure a little bit? I go into coaching about it so that they don't even really think about what I did wrong. I'm still proactively looking to dig with them. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do, practices that we can put into place as coaches so that we're less in that line of fire where we would take things personally. That's the bottom. Yeah. Even if somebody says, you know what, you were a minute late today, our natural reaction to something is, I was in the restroom and whatever. We go into the excuses and justification. And then maybe later, you know what, they're right. This is a very expensive session. And even if it wasn't, they're still investing the time. They're here on time. I need to be here on time. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's one thing I always aim to never do is make excuses.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's always the case, but I'm a big believer in not making excuses. If I've messed up, I'm going to apologize. I'm not going to make an excuse.
Sure.
Yeah, I've messed up.
Absolutely.
But I would much rather, if I've had the situation once I couldn't get to my office on time because there was a big parade going through the city and most of the roads were blocked. I was like, okay, I didn't know that. And it's okay, that is could I have been prepared for that? I possibly could. I could have actually taken a look at what was going on or even asked Google if there's any local events going on today and stuff like that.
Free.
I could have done that and I didn't do that. It's still like back when I used to work in the airline, if I was late for a flight, if I was stuck in traffic for 3 hours, which did happen to me one time on what was usually a 30-minute journey turned into just over 3 hours because of an accident they said to me, it's still your duty to be here in good time. And even if 3 and a bit hours is more than good time, my excuse doesn't count for anything because that flight's still gone without me. That's the reality of it. And it's not personal. It's not about me taking it personally, because I think we do have this tendency to beat up on ourselves about this stuff. It is just feedback ultimately, and it's feedback that you can improve from or you can ignore. That's it. Have you ever done?
I think that's the choice that you. Yeah. I think that's the difference in what we're talking about is if you want to get out of the habit. If you are somebody like you said, oh my God, I used to take everything personally. Back in the time, there was a time, and maybe there are people listening to us who were like, "Yeah, that kind of is me." Somebody might say, "Oh, what'd you do to your hair? What do you mean? What's wrong with my hair?" You know, like nothing. I'm just asking. It looks different, or it looks this, or. But there are people who are. I call that cat on a hot tin roof syndrome. I think about it, jumping around and being almost like responsive and reactive without really assessing and processing. And I think that's a really good first step as a coach is to properly and objectively look at that moment and say, okay, again, like I said, for me, it's how did I show up today? What was the big challenge? What was my perception? And do I even know what the issue was with the client? That's why I always ask at the end, and I leave about 5 minutes. So what did you value today? Because it always leads to a little bit of a conversation. Again, so I have perspective and understanding. Or what was most challenging? Sometimes I'll ask, I don't like the why, because I don't know. Do we always know why? We don't always know why. But sometimes I'll ask why or what. Really, what did you find most challenging? And keep asking until we get to the core of that, which helps you understand that it really isn't about you. Get over yourself. It's not about you.
You touched on something earlier. I want to come back to and go a bit deeper into it because you touched on this thing about it. It relates to not really being about you. It's like the whole thing of why we don't need to take it personally. If I say something to you, I hate your hat, Angie, I really hate your hat, you're going to go, I'm not wearing a hat. What the heck? Are you going to take that personally? No, you're just going to think I'm nuts. But if I say to you, those glasses really don't suit you, you might take that a bit, and I don't mean that because they look really lovely, but you might take that a bit more personally. Just because if it hits a note, here we go, changing the glasses, we're getting the sparkly ones now. Yay.
You knew I was going to do it. You knew I was going to definitely Elton John you. Go ahead. Better.
So you might.
But go ahead.
I love them. They're just as gorgeous. And this the whole thing of is you're only going to take it personally if it hits a note, if it touches you in that way. It's our insecurities that help us to take things personally. And then so if we don't feel insecure about something, we're not going to take it personally. If I say to you, Angie, you're a shitty coach, you're terrible at coaching, you're not going to take that personally because it's not true. You're just going to think, yeah, what do you know?
Well, no,
what the heck are you talking
say,
about?
well, what would make you say that? No, I don't believe it to be true, but I'm curious as to what you perceive as why I'm a shitty coach.
If it doesn't resonate with you, if it doesn't feel like it's right about you, then you're not going to feel it that way. But what you were saying was interesting because one of the things that I heard a trainer say one time at an event that I was there to learn from, somebody said something to him that was rude and cheeky. I think it was meant as a joke. And his response was, why did you say that? That was his one. And I thought he definitely felt a bit attacked by it. And maybe he wasn't completely sure. So he said, why did you say that? I think it was a great thing to say. It was like, it was a good response to that. Like, why did you say that? What was your intention? Right. Because that is what you have to look at. And sometimes when you say something like that to someone, like, what's your intention in saying that? So yeah, it was a really great response to say, what's your intention in asking me that? Why do you ask me that? Because it really gets people to think about what they're saying. I was hearing something on a podcast, I think the other day, of somebody where when they felt in that kind of situation saying, say that again to me. Because when somebody has to say it again, they have to reconsider what they've just said. And often so that's also great. I think it is important that just even in saying those things, like, there's always going to be that instant emotional reaction, and we're probably not going to be able to avoid that to some degree. Like, if somebody cuts you up in traffic, you're going to stick your finger up at them and call them some beautiful names probably, and hope that your mum's not sitting next to you in the car like happened to me last year. But going on from that, I usually shake that off and let it go and then wish them better driving in the future, because I don't want to carry that negativity with me. I don't want somebody doing something stupid that they're probably not even aware of, or maybe they're just being an a-hole intentionally, to ruin my day. Why should they get to ruin my day? Why should I carry that with me? And that really is your being an effect in your life rather than being a cause. And that's why I'm not taking things personal. Is it personal if somebody cuts you up in traffic? Probably not.
Doing a session though. Let me ask you a question. If you are sitting there as a coach, I mentioned what I do. I'll take that pause, and I might have one of probably a half a dozen questions that I've asked when I've been in those kinds of situations in a moment or at the entire session. But like, how do you perceive it if you are in a session and somebody is saying to you, if I say to you, you're my coach, John, I'm not really sure why you feel compelled to keep talking about this. I feel like are you coming at me? Like, you're bringing up this very sore subject over and over for me. And I was pretty clear. I don't really want to talk about this anymore. Why are you doing that to me? What would you say?
How would I handle that? I would go straight to asking questions. What is it that's making you feel uncomfortable or attacked about this? And where do you want to go from here? Is there something that you don't want to approach that we should be leaving alone for now, and maybe come back to when you feel ready?
Yeah.
That's where I'd want to go with it. I think if you get into a position where you're trying to defend or justify yourself, you've already pretty much lost there.
Absolutely. You've lost control.
You've lost the relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I had another situation. I'm thinking about this particular person. She was a client, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago. And she was in a really heavy relationship, and in my opinion, even somewhat abusive, borderline. And she was all about the space that I opened up for her and talking about it. And when we had come into our next session, and this was pretty early on, so I think it might have been like our third session, I came in and said, how are you feeling since our last conversation? Because it was very heavy. Okay, I'm just saying this. It was very deeply emotional for her and she was already in therapy, so I didn't have to go push her into that direction or direct her into that space. But I wanted to know how she felt because she was reeling. And and the question was, so since our conversation, how are you feeling about that admission? Because that's what it was. And she literally lost her mind because I felt like that was a really pivotal moment for her of strength and also uncertainty. So there was clarity for her, and then there was uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what she brought into this next session and lost her mind. How dare you? Why are you focusing? I don't really feel like this is what we should. Isn't it enough that I already talked about it and told you where I was at? And I had to, sorry, something was trying to fly in my mouth. That was a pivotal moment with her. And I let her go for a minute because I wanted to understand. Obviously, I think I knew right out of the gate, truth is uncomfortable for people sometimes. And I have to recognize that as a coach. And even though I might admit it, I might want to take it back. It's like the email when you're like, let me tell you how I feel. Then you send it. You're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Remorse. So I let her speak for a few. And then I really had to say, I need to interrupt you. I need to respectfully interrupt. And I just would like to take a pause for a minute. Just do me a favor, take a deep breath. Because I'm focusing on her energy. Because nothing I say, nothing I ask is going to have a positive outcome if I keep now asking her, like, what makes you feel that way or whatever, even with the best of intentions. So I know that because she's so energetic behind the negative that I have to pause her to say, just do me a favor, as your coach, just take a minute, take a couple of breaths, because I do want to understand, but I can't understand when it's coming at me in that way.
Yeah.
You do have to be able to pull something out of your pocket in the moment and deal with things. It's okay. What do I need to do here?
In that, I think I probably one time have had a situation that was like that, and it was earlier on in my coaching days. And I think I did then what I would do now, which is let them go, let them have at it. Because if we get to the end of the time and they're still going, we just say, okay, we need to end the call now anyway. But really what I want them to do is let it all out, have a breath, and then, all right, can we talk now? That's generally what I'm going to do, is spit it all out. Because what I really don't want to do, and I think I've had a coach do this with me, and I'm not an angry person generally. It takes a heck of a lot. I'm very calm, and I'm inner peace guy most of the time. When it's a rip, and heaven help anyone who's in the way. But it's rare. I could probably even count on one hand the amount of times I've lost my temper in my life. It's so rare. And not that I feel like I have to bottle stuff up. That's just my nature. I think one of the worst things you could do that somebody did with me on a coaching session is say, I'm sorry if something I said is making you feel like this.
Absolutely.
No, what kind of apology is that? That's like the sort of political apology. Mistakes were made. If the correct thing says we made mistakes, or what you said actually I found offensive or hurtful or whatever else. I think that's probably one of the worst things you could say, is to make that sort of kind of fake apology, is I'm sorry that you feel that way, because that's what it's saying. And
have you ever apologized? Have you ever apologized to a client?
Yes. Yeah. I think it came up on a call before, actually. I think I had to apologize to some clients who I felt that, a handful of clients where I felt that the coaching boundary wasn't right and that we couldn't recover it. I said, apology of, this is on me as much as anything else, that I've allowed this to happen or work together when we probably shouldn't be working together because there isn't a sufficient coaching boundary there. Yeah, I think in that sense, I'm going to take ownership. If I feel I have to, I'm going to take ownership. But in a situation where somebody is ranting or raving or blaming you for something, probably no, I'm not going to apologize for that. But if it's something that I know is, if it's you showed up late for your coaching session, okay, I own that. I apologize. I'm going to do better. It's like that. What else can you do? So I will own my mistakes, but I'm not going to apologize for stuff I haven't done.
I think that a lot of coaches hide from too, though, getting feedback, because they don't want to know. I think they feel like if they open up the platform or the floor for that it gives people the opportunity to like nitpick or maybe look for the tiny pieces that aren't that relevant.
We all love the feedback that says how good you are and blow smoke up your backside and say, oh, you're fantastic, you're the best coach I've ever had. We all love that. We can all take that kind of feedback. And it's like some people maybe do get a little uncomfortable being given positive feedback, I know, but most of us are quite happy in our coaching careers to have clients come and tell us how good we are and how much they love the coaching and all that kind of stuff.
Do you take that personally? If you get positive feedback, do you, on the other hand, on the other side of this, take that personally?
Oh, what an interesting question. Probably.
Okay. So it's that interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting, but I'm very wary of letting stuff like that go to my head. Very wary of that. It's like, I'm happy. I think I take it personally in the sense of I'm happy that they feel that way, that they're happy with the coaching. Do I then think I'm the most amazing coach ever? No, I don't. No, I'm just the coach you happen to be with them and tend to think. So yeah, yes and no. It's a yes and no sort of answer.
I think that I don't as well. I think especially when it's at the end of, let's just say they're coming to the end of their program with you and it's the last session. I always want it to be about coaching, always. And any of my students or past clients, whatever, that maybe hear this episode, they will definitely attest to that. I never want somebody to move forward with me or even refer me because they like me. So if we get to the last session and I'm wrapping things up and doing this review that I do, it's a whole thing that I do, a process that I follow. And we talk about, well, what could be next? What are you still feeling challenged? Like, where do you still feel challenged? And would you like to move forward and do some more coaching? Again, however I say it, it's not always like that. But when I've had plenty of people go, oh my gosh, Angie, I love you. Of course I want to. And I'm uncomfortable because I'm like, wait a minute. So I will always, no matter how they phrase it, sometimes it's no, and for whatever reasons, and that's fine. Most of the time it's yes. Most of the time it's yes. So when it's yes, I say to them, so no matter what tell me what it is that makes you want to move forward. You love me, but let's focus on your coaching and your outcomes. All right, what do you love about me? What do you love? I, again, need to understand their perspective of coaching and the relationship we have and kind of circle that back and say, okay, then how will that benefit you in another round of coaching with me? I always want to keep them in that mindset of it's not about me, it's about you, and it's about the journey.
Because in reality it is. I think that's great. I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that approach. We could all do probably a far better job of getting feedback or reaching out for feedback and not just the good feedback. We don't just need to hear the nice things people say about us. That's what I was going to ask you earlier. If you've ever done Toastmasters, have you ever been to Toastmasters is a public speaking organization, international. Yeah. Most people are going to have a Toastmasters club somewhere pretty near to them. So you can go along, and this isn't promo for Toastmasters, but I have been involved with them over a number of years and may do again at some point in the future. But when you go to a session, you can, if there's a guest, you can get involved in what they call table topics, which is like an improv thing that they start with. And if you're a member, you can do prepared talks and things like that. But everyone is going to get feedback. Whether you're doing the improv or whether you're doing the prepared talk, you're going to get feedback from people. And some of that feedback is going to be good and telling you what you've done well or that they really enjoyed it. And some of that feedback is going to be developmental feedback. Well, this could have gone better, or this bit didn't seem to go so well, or maybe it seemed like you lost your flow, or you're talking a bit too quickly, or maybe you need to use a little bit more vocal variety here and there.
Sure.
Kinds of things that you're probably...
right? Whatever it is.
Hopefully, but still hard not to take personally when you put like heart and soul into an 8-minute talk that you're delivering to a group of people. And if you think it's gone amazingly, and then you get some feedback, say, yeah. But the thing is, without that, you do not get the same level of growth. Like, there's only so much feedback you can give yourself, and there's only so much believing in yourself is going to help. We need the developmental stuff. We need the critical feedback that says, actually, this bit wasn't so good. Some of these bits were. We need a mix, really. We need to know what we've done well, and we need to know where there's room for improvement, and perhaps what didn't really work. Because otherwise, we can't improve what we do. And same as in coaching and in most parts of our lives, we're often afraid to get that kind of real feedback because we do tend to take feedback personally. And it's absolutely essential that we get that feedback from people. And use it and let it grow. So we need to develop a little bit of a tougher shell sometimes around getting feedback from people and not be like super sensitive about these things. And I think the only way we can get better at receiving that kind of feedback is to open ourselves up to it on a regular basis.
So funny, because I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying and where I do that in my life. You all may not know yet. Maybe some of you do, because I talk about it a lot, but I love to cook. Love to cook. And I'm not a big recipe person. If somebody hands me a recipe, I don't even know why I do it. Because I restructure the whole thing and think about how I want it to look, taste, feel, texture, all the things. And it's so funny because I've had people like, I set the table, so to speak. I work really hard on preparing whatever it is I'm preparing. And I always say, so how is it? And oh my gosh, it's delicious. It's this and it's that. And it's funny because I just realized about myself, I never ask people like, really, what makes it taste so delicious for you? But if somebody says, oh, you know what? And it's usually, I will say the male person closest to me at the moment, my husband will say sometimes, and if he says something like, it's a little too salty for me, I'm usually like, yeah, I think I was a little heavy-handed with the sea salt or something. If it's, you should, and he'll start telling me how to remake this recipe. And I look at him and I'm like, who asked you? And you did. So it's funny how I'm realizing that I do not ask people when they say something is delicious, what was delicious about it. That's first. That's a good moment for me. But the other thing is that I'm not really open. Like I find myself going, I did that because like I already knew and I'm like prepared. And so it's funny. I do it less with my coaching, I think, than I do with my cooking. Because my cooking is so authentically like me and my creation, and my kitchen becomes like the laboratory, if you will. But it's just interesting. And I think that the habit or the mindset, I shouldn't say the habit, the mindset is, and I use this a lot in my coaching. You've heard me talk about it, the Henry Ford approach to things. While he was competing in the very beginning, he was competing with GM. He had no money. They were rich. And he literally had this philosophy while he was sitting and looking at his creation, his very first automobile. He didn't look at it and go, I'm using this as an example, like, what's wrong with the steering? He looked at every component, drove the vehicle, and thought, what should I do better? It was never, which he was known for. Anybody who's interested, go look at the documentary. It's fascinating. But he literally looked at it like, this is great, and I can still make this better. This isn't so great. I need to make this better. And it wasn't that it was wrong. It wasn't that it was negative in any way. But we're certainly not all driving the very first car that was ever made. Well, why? Because improvements were made. And there's always better safety features. Like everything, every industry grows. We need to be of a growth mindset. And I think if we can keep ourselves in that mindset, we will be better for it even when we cook. Just saying. Okay.
Hopefully our personal development stretches into all areas of our lives. And
right.
Very few of us are so compartmentalized in our lives that we are completely different. It all merges in one way or another. But yeah, absolutely. As much as we can talk about not taking things personally, I think what I mentioned before about you're always going to have your instant emotional reaction to things, your instant response. You cannot control that. No matter how much you don't want to take things personally, your initial emotional response is going to come up and it's going to be valid. And that's why it's so important to be able to take a breath, take a beat, take a step back, to decide how you want to go next. Because it really is, not taking things personally is more of a decision than anything else.
Yeah.
You have to decide not to take things personally.
Right.
Sometimes we have to really talk things through and work through. Sometimes it can take us a bit longer to process stuff, as we've experienced over recent times, to get past not taking that personally. But we get there. We generally get there. But it is always that decision of not going to take this personally. But what I learned.
Awesome. Shift that mindset. Have a higher level of control over your responses. And it is emotional, and it definitely is contributing to like emotional intelligence. I think having that mindset of it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's just what can change and what can be better. You're setting yourself up for great success, and if you take that approach, you'll be able to have, I think, ultimately better sessions and more referrals. It's just great for business too. It all trickles. It has a cascading effect. Yeah. Awesome.
I think we've covered a lot of good stuff.
I think
on the
so
show.
too.
I always love our conversations, Angie. They're so cool. And I think we can now reveal what is coming down the pipeline, so to speak.
We are pulling back the curtain.
We are. We're going to be coming live with the show on LinkedIn and YouTube for now. Maybe some more platforms in the future, but certainly LinkedIn and YouTube. There'll be details about that on those platforms. So certainly, if you want to join us live for the Coaching Clinic podcast, we'll have information on the platform. So follow either of us on LinkedIn or follow the channel on YouTube. You'll find the links in the show notes for this episode. So please do feel free to connect with us and also to connect with follow us on YouTube as well. And we'll be coming to you live and real, and you'll be able to interact with us. You will be able to submit questions and responses, and interact with you as well. So we are very excited about that and bring that to you. In the meantime, you can still get in touch with us and you can contact us on social media, but certainly you can leave us a voicemail, and it's free to do. You can go to speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast, leave us a voicemail, and we might just feature it on the show. But for now, we're going to look forward to coming to you live. You're still going to get your regular Wednesday episodes of the show. But if you want to get ahead of the beat and actually want to interact and ask questions and be a part of this with us, then come and join us on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'd love to see you.
Looking forward. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.